Hello, Sports fan. This is Steven here for Sports Choice Plus. I'm bringing you a very special breakdown. I'm covering what should the Minnesota Timberwolves do. Before we get right into that, I want to make sure that you're subscribed in the YouTube channel so you can get all the updates and all the breakdowns. Without further ado, let's get right into it. Seeing exactly how the season ended for the Minnesota Timberwolves, you saw a lot of discouraging things. And I will say this, the Minnesota Timberwolves are one of the most closest units. Hearing reports of what goes on inside of locker rooms and seeing how Ant-Man not only was a leader on and off the court, you're seeing a lot of things. Now, I will say this. As good as Karl-Anthony Towns is, Karl-Anthony Towns is the problem. When you think about Karl-Anthony Towns and how talented he is, he can rebound, he can shoot, he can do left hand, right hand as far as layups and dunks. He can do things like help shot block. He can do things, but he lacks the killer instinct. When you think about Ant-Man and what he brought to the table in his coming out party in the NBA, you saw exactly what went down. You saw how there was games where Karl-Anthony Towns, you didn't even realize he was on the team because he wasn't on the stat sheet doing anything. He was just standing around, or he was at the three-point line lugging threes. A big part of why they got their butts kicked against the Dallas Mavericks is because Karl-Anthony Towns didn't play up to his potential. What we saw with the New York Knicks without Julius Randle and Brunson, you saw that this team plays a little bit better without Julius Randle. And it possibly could be because they may need to get somebody else, or they could get somebody else that fills that role better. But overall, when you're thinking about just what this team is now, the New York Knicks may consider what the Minnesota Timberwolves may need to consider. They may need to move this offseason and move a star player to get possible different pieces. When you think of Naz Reid played better than Karl-Anthony Towns the entire playoffs. When you think about the roles in Gobert and company, Naz Reid did shoot a couple threes, but he also stayed in the paint. He also was more versatile on defense. He also gave Ant more help than Karl-Anthony Towns did. From the standpoint of leaving a guy by himself in the Western Conference Finals, it looked crazy because Ant was leading the charge every night trying to bring these guys back from a deficit because Karl-Anthony Towns was just lugging threes. Now, mind you, Karl-Anthony Towns is not the only blame for the Minnesota loss. You got a couple other people too, but you got to keep in mind, you're a superstar. If you're a superstar, you're counted on to show up in big games. Oftentimes, you didn't show up in big games, and that's why the Minnesota Timberwolves got blown out like they did to leave the NBA Western Conference Finals. So I think that the Minnesota Timberwolves have to seriously consider possibly moving him and seeing what you could possibly get in return for Karl-Anthony Towns. If you could trade him for 2 or 3 good role players that adds to this team, whether it be defensive players, sharpshooters, guys that can actually show up to the game and give Ant-Man that support he needs. This is Ant-Man's team now. It's no longer Karl-Anthony Towns' team. So you have to adjust. You have to build. Rudy Gobert, for what it is, I mean, he is what he is. But you got to think. You have Naz Reid. You have other different players on this Minnesota roster that can help fill out. And freeing up that cap space can open up spots for different people to bring in to round out the roster even better. Going from a 7-man rotation to possibly an 8 or 9-man rotation and giving Ant-Man that support he needs. I'm all in favor of getting rid of Karl-Anthony Towns for the Minnesota Timberwolves. I feel like he's had his time with Andrew Wiggins. He's had his time by itself. And he's had his time now with Ant-Man to show what he could do. He dropped the ball on the biggest stage and possibly the biggest year for the Minnesota Timberwolves franchise. And you got to think, moving forward, you want to capitalize on that momentum. You want to make this team better. And sometimes it means getting rid of a star piece to get better. So all you Minnesota Timberwolves fans, all you NBA fans, get in the comment section below. Definitely check out Sports Choice Plus, and I'll see you on the next video.